I still remember the exact moment when everything changed. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no harsh words thrown across the room. It happened in silence, a soft, quiet silence that settled in the space between us like fog. A silence that told me my place in his life was no longer where it used to be. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had gone to visit my son, not to stay long, just to see him, hear his voice, and feel, even for a moment, that I was still part of his world. I had spent the whole morning preparing a small dish he loved since childhood. Something simple, something he always said tasted like home. When I arrived, his wife answered the door. She was polite. Or maybe polite was too generous a word. She looked at me the way someone looks at a visitor they did not expect, someone they were not ready to welcome. "Oh," she said quietly, "you're here." I smiled and held up the dish. "I made this for him. I thought I'd forgotten." She hesitated before stepping aside. Her hesitation hit me harder than any harsh sentence could have. I walked in, trying not to let the discomfort show on my face. My son was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and gave me a small, almost distracted smile. The kind you give to a distant neighbor or someone you barely recognize. "Hi," he said softly. Not "Mama," not "Enemy," not the warm greeting he once had. Just "Hi," a simple word that felt like a wall. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. That maybe he was tired, maybe he was busy, maybe married life was a lot to handle. But then it happened. Quietly, naturally, without him realizing that a mother's heart hears everything. His wife asked him from the kitchen, who was at the door, and he replied, with a voice so casual, "It's her. Her. Not my mother. Not even Mom. Just her." A stranger, an outsider, someone he did not want to acknowledge with a full name or relationship. I felt something inside me shrink. Not break, because breaking is loud. This was quieter, a slow sinking feeling in my chest, like the weight of years pressing down all at once. I stood there, holding the dish, unsure where to place it, unsure where to place myself in my own son's life. That was the moment, right there, in that quiet room, with afternoon sunlight falling across the floor, that I realized I had lost something I didn't even know I was in danger of losing. And the strange thing was, I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I simply smiled, just a small, polite smile, and pretended everything was fine. Because sometimes a mother learns to swallow her pain before anyone sees it. Sometimes love makes silence feel safer than truth. But deep down, I knew this was the beginning of a story I never wanted to tell. A story of distance, of misunderstandings, of small moment. To understand how painful that moment was, I need to start from the beginning. Long before marriage. Long before misunderstandings. Long before life placed us on opposite sides of a quiet room. My son, Rahim, was my only child. For years, it was just the two of us. I raised him alone after his father passed away when he was still very young, too young to remember the shape of his father's hands or the sound of his laughter. But he remembered mine. He held my hand everywhere we went. He laughed at my silly jokes. He smiled every time I walked into a room. When he was a child, he used to run to the door the second he heard my key turning. Mama is home. His small footsteps would rush across the floor, and he would wrap his arms around my waist as if he feared I might disappear if he didn't hold tight enough. People used to tell me that boys grow up. They grow distant. They stop showing affection. But Rahim wasn't like that. At least, not then. He would sit with me for hours, telling me about school, friends, the games he played, the dreams he had. He would help me cut vegetables, sweep the floor, even fold clothes, poorly, but with so much effort that I never corrected him. When he grew older, into his teenage years, we had the usual ups and downs. The little arguments about curfews, the frustration of exams, the occasional closed door. But even then, he always came back to me. He always said, "I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean it." He always called me Mama. That word felt like a small miracle every time it left his lips. When he got into university, he became even more responsible. He found part-time work, saved money, helped me with bills. On some nights, when I returned late from working extra shifts, I would find dinner already cooked. He would smile proudly and say, "Sit down, Mama. I made your favorite." Life was not perfect, but it was ours. Simple, warm, and deeply connected. But nothing stays the. After that phone call, I told myself not to overthink it. I have always been good at that, at telling my heart to stay quiet when my mind says everything is fine. "He's busy," I whispered to myself while washing dishes. "He's grown now. He still loves you." I repeated those words like a prayer. But silence has a way of getting louder when you listen closely. Before, my son used to call me without a reason, just to check in, just to hear my voice. Now, I noticed something different. Every call had a purpose. He called when he needed something: information, a document, an address, a favor. The calls were short, clean, efficient, like conversations between coworkers. When the call ended, there was no softness left behind, just the quiet hum of my refrigerator, just the ticking of the clock on the wall. I started keeping my phone closer, on the table while eating, beside my pillow at night, in my hand when I walked from room to room. But deep down, I knew. I was waiting. The way he spoke changed. When he did call, his tone felt different. Not rude, not cold, just careful. As if every word passed through a filter first. I stopped asking certain questions. I didn't want to sound curious, or worried, or involved. "How are you?" felt too personal now. So instead, I asked safe things. Is work okay? Are you eating properly? Is the weather cold there? His answers were polite but distant. Yes, it's fine. Everything's okay. Everything was always okay. I used to be invited. Not formally, just naturally. Come over this weekend. Stay for lunch. We'll talk. Now, visits felt scheduled. Planned days in advance. Time limited. Come by for a bit, he would say. We have something later. I noticed how often later came. When I visited, his wife was polite. Always polite. She smiled. She offered tea. She asked how I was. But they moved quickly, like someone checking the time. I told myself not to read into it. The table felt different. There was a time when the dining table felt warm, loud, full. Now it felt neat, quiet. I sat straight, hands folded, watching more than speaking. I didn't want to say the wrong thing, didn't want to overstay, didn't want to become a burden. Sometimes I would catch my son looking at his phone while I talked. Not often, but enough. I would stop mid-sentence. "Oh, I'm sorry." I would say softly, "You were busy." He would look up quickly. No, I'm listening." But his eyes told a different story. Before, he asked me for advice about work, money, life. Now decisions were already made by the time I heard about them. We decided to move. We bought something. We planned a trip. I was informed, not included. I nodded, smiled. "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. But happiness and loneliness. One afternoon, I called him just to hear his voice. He answered on the third ring. Yes, that word again. Not mom, just yes. I swallowed. "Nothing important," I said quickly. "I just wanted to check in." There was a pause. Then he said, "I'm a bit busy. Can I call you later?" Later never came. That night, I sat on my bed, holding my phone, watching the screen go dark. I began choosing my words carefully, my tone, my timing. I didn't call too often. I didn't message too late. I didn't ask questions that might feel like pressure. I was careful not to sound like I missed him too much, because I was afraid of becoming inconvenient, afraid of pushing him further away, afraid of hearing the truth. So I stayed quiet, and silence grew comfortable for everyone but me. A friend once asked me, "Does your son visit often?" I smiled. "Yes, when he can." She nodded, but her eyes lingered. Another time, a neighbor said, "Sign." A friend once asked me, "Does your son visit often?" I smiled. "Yes, when he can." She nodded, but her eyes lingered. Another time, a neighbor said, "You must miss having him around." I laughed softly. "Oh, he's busy building his life." They didn't know. No one did. That loneliness was mine alone. Months passed. He still never called me mom. Not once. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped for a second. Every time it wasn't him, my shoulders dropped. When it was him, I braced myself for a voice that no longer reached me the same way. I told myself I had accepted it. that this was the natural order of things. Children grow, parents step back, but acceptance should feel peaceful. This felt heavy, like carrying a bag you forgot you were holding. I didn't know then that silence can be a warning, that emotional distance doesn't arrive suddenly. It arrives slowly, politely, one missed call at a time, one forgotten word. I didn't know that soon something would happen that would make everything clear, something that would show me exactly where I stood in my son's life and how far away I had already become. I always believed that if something was truly wrong, I would feel it clearly, like a sharp pain, like a loud argument. But I was wrong. The truth did not arrive loudly. It came quietly, and it stayed. It started with an invitation. My son called one evening. His voice was calm, neutral. "We're having a small dinner this Sunday," he said. "You can come for a bit." For a bit. That phrase stayed with me. Still, I felt relieved. He called. He invited me. That should have been enough. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not because I was asked to bring anything, but because that is what mothers do. I cooked his favorite dish, the one he loved as a child, the one he used to ask for on his birthday. I packed it carefully, wrapped it twice, carried it like something fragile. Their house was neat, quiet, organized. Everything had its place. I stood at the door for a second before knocking, straightened my clothes, took a breath. When the door opened, his wife smiled. "Oh, you're here," she said. Not warmly, not coldly, just stated. My son was in the living room. He looked up. "Hi," he said. Still not Mom. The table was already set. Plates placed evenly. Glasses filled. Food arranged carefully. There were others there too. Friends. People I didn't know well. I smiled, nodded, took my seat. No one asked me to sit closer. No one asked about my day. Conversation flowed around me. Plans, trips, work stories. I listened. I always listened. At some point, one of the guests asked my son a question. "So, what does your mom think about the move?" He laughed lightly. "Oh, she doesn't really get involved in these things." He said it casually, like it meant nothing. I felt my chest tighten. I looked at him. He didn't look back. No one noticed my silence. Later, I tried to help in the kitchen. Out of habit, out of love, I reached for a plate. "Oh, no," his wife said gently. "I've got it." Her tone was polite, firm. I stepped back. My hands felt empty as the evening ended. My son walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded. Then he added, "Next time, please call before bringing food. We already planned everything." I smiled. "I'm sorry," I said. "I just thought." "It's okay," he said quickly. "But we like to keep things simple." Simple. I nodded again. That night, I walked home slowly. The air was cool. The streetlights were soft. I replayed every moment in my head, every word, every look, and for the first time, I allowed myself to admit something painful. I was no longer needed, not as a mother, not even as a presence. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity. I realized I had been shrinking myself, making myself quieter, smaller, trying not to take space in a life where I no longer had a role. And my son, he wasn't cruel. He was simply moving. When I reached home, I placed the untouched food in the fridge, sat at the table. The chair across from me was empty. I looked at it for a long time, and for the first time, I whispered the truth out loud. He doesn't need me anymore. That night, something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply cracked open. And through that crack, I saw everything clearly. I saw the distance. I saw the silence. I saw myself standing at the edge of my son's life, afraid to step closer. And I knew nothing would be the same again. After that night, I stopped waiting. Not all at once, not bravely, just slowly. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes, stopped keeping it beside my pillow at night, stopped jumping every time it rang. It wasn't anger that pushed me there. It was tiredness. A deep kind of tiredness that comes from holding hope too tightly for too long. My days grew quieter than I expected. Mornings were still the same. I woke up early, made tea, sat by the window. But something was missing. Not noise, not activity. Expectation. There was no one I was waiting to hear from, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. One afternoon, I found an old photo. It was buried in a drawer, slightly bent at the edges. Me, younger, standing alone, before marriage, before motherhood, before my whole identity became tied to someone else's needs. I stared at that woman for a long time. She looked calm, strong, whole. I wondered when I stopped seeing. First, I didn't know what to do with all the quiet. I would sit at the table long after meals were finished, just sitting, listening to the clock. Then, slowly, I started doing small things. I walked in the evenings, not far, just around the block. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way the sky changes color, the sound of children laughing somewhere nearby. Life was still happening, even without me at the center of my son's world. Weeks later, my phone rang. It was him. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. But this time, I breathed through it. "Hello?" I said. Not my son. Not, "Are you eating well?" Just, "Hello." He talked about something small, something practical. I listened. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel disappointment either. Just calm. And that surprised me. I stopped offering help unless asked. Stopped checking in too often. Not to punish him, not to make a point, but to protect myself. I learned that love doesn't mean constant availability. It doesn't mean disappearing for someone else's comfort. I was still his mother, but I was also still a person. people think grief must be loud. Mine wasn't. It was gentle, persistent, like a soft ache that never fully leaves. I grieved the relationship we once had, the closeness, the way he used to say, "Mom," without thinking. But I didn't blame him. He was building his life, and I had to learn how to build mine again too. One evening, I wrote him a letter, not to send, just to release what I carried. All wrote about loving him, about missing him, about understanding. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. When I finished, I folded it and placed it in a drawer. Some words are meant to be written, not delivered. Peace didn't arrive suddenly. It came in moments, in warm tea, in quiet mornings, in the sound of rain against the window. I learned to enjoy my own company again, to sit without feeling forgotten. One day I realized something important. My son hadn't stopped loving me. He had simply stopped needing me the way he once did. And while that truth hurt, it also freed me. I didn't have to compete, didn't have to shrink. I could love him without losing myself. Healing is not about fixing what broke. Sometimes it's about accepting that things changed and learning to stand strong in the new shape life takes. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was simply standing somewhere else, and that was enough. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, not by erasing the pain, but by teaching us how to carry it more gently. Months passed after I learned to step back. Life didn't suddenly become joyful, but it became steady. And sometimes steady is enough. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my son. I didn't rush to answer. I didn't panic. I simply picked it up when I was ready. "Hello," I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then he said, "Mom," just once, just that word. It landed softly. Not like before, but not empty either. I didn't cry. I didn't react. I just breathed. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep. Nothing emotional. He told me about his work. I told him about my day. Before hanging up, he said, "I'll call you again soon." I smiled. "Whenever you can," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it. That call didn't fix everything. It didn't bring back the past. It didn't restore what we lost. But it showed me something important. Love doesn't always look the same forever. It changes shape. It grows quieter. And sometimes it needs space to survive. I learned that being a mother does not mean holding on tightly forever. It means knowing when to loosen your grip, when to trust that the love you gave did its job. My son didn't stop loving me. He stopped leaning on me. And that is not rejection. It is growth. I stopped measuring my worth by how often my phone rang, stopped counting days between calls. I filled my life with things that belonged to me. Morning walks, old friends, quiet evenings with myself. I remembered that I existed before I was mom, and I still exist now. If you are listening and feel forgotten, if someone you love grew distant, if a name you once heard often is now rare, please know this: you are not invisible. Sometimes people move forward without realizing who they leave behind, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is step back with grace. Love does not disappear just because it becomes quiet. It rests, it waits, and when it returns, even in small ways, it still matters. The day my son stopped calling me Mom, I felt invisible. But today, I understand something deeper. I was never invisible. I was simply learning how to see myself again.